Steve, you good? Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 4th, 2022 planning meeting for the Pine-Richland School District. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Ms. Williams.
Mr. DiTullio.
Here.
Mrs. Turchik.
Here.
Mr. Kashani.
Here.
Mrs. Brusalis.
Here.
Mr. Cassidy.
Here.
Mrs. Hillman.
Here.
Mr. Lyons.
Here.
Dr. Mihalik.
Here.
Dr. Myers.
Here.
Thank you.
Before we move into recognition of visitors, just want to say if you didn't watch the last meeting, please watch the end of it. We had a couple student speakers, and I do want to raise them up again. Again, if you want to see what not just Pine-Richland's doing, because obviously the students have some say in this, obviously, but they conducted themselves very well spoken. So we always want to raise that up. I'm always impressed today when I can see our students get up in front of groups of people and speak so well, especially in the day and age when sometimes you see kids and you don't think that they can talk to each other in a room without a cell phone and text messages going back and forth and 16 emojis. So I do appreciate that. Please watch that. It's wonderful. We will move into item 1.02, recognition of visitors, and Ms. Williams.
We have one in-person speaker, and that's Ms. Catherine Ravati. Kathleen.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I actually have quite a few comments on a few new matters that are on the agenda tonight, or might have been on the governance agenda. Policy 146.1, trauma-informed approach, as well as the revisions to Policy 832, which I know were just discussed in the governance meeting. But I'm going to focus on just one issue that I have right now, and that is the high school PTO's sponsorship of a speaker tomorrow night at an event entitled Unconscious Bias. I think it's something to the effect of preventing our students for the world after high school. I sent an email late Friday night to the administration as well as the high school PTO expressing my concerns about why this event was being sponsored by the PTO, number one, and why now, given the fact that this board and administration are still actively engaged in debating the wording over Policy 832 and have not even decided that it is something that is going to be adopted. I serve on the PTO for Eden Hall. I know that anytime we suggest something to Principal Smith about sponsoring an event that might be controversial or divisive, we're told to stay away from it completely. So this is very hard for me to stand up here tonight. I know a lot of people that are very pro Policy 832. In fact, I'm on the leadership committee for the DEI initiative because I wanted to be one of those people that wasn't going to assume 832 was about CRT, wasn't going to assume it was anti-white, I wasn't going to assume any of those things I wanted to learn. But I'm finding that really nobody knows very much about what this policy means right now. In fact, now it's called something entirely different. And I don't know if that's an attempt to disguise that it's still a DEI policy or what. The last meeting I attended, it was still called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And then on March 14th, I think it was, all of a sudden it's called Every Student. But it still has as its principal goal the embedding of equity principles into the entire Pine-Richland educational system. That's fine. Nobody has to answer to me specifically about that decision. But I'm not going to be part of a leadership council so that Dr. Miller can say, parents were consulted, all the PowerPoints are out there, everybody knew about this. Same thing happened with the Health Leadership Council, okay? What is actually happening is happening behind the scenes. I have no visibility into it. I shouldn't have any more visibility than anybody else on the council. But I don't understand what is going on when the high school PTO, whose other activities include spirit wear fundraising, prom planning, all kinds of typical PTO activities, is now sponsoring an unconscious bias seminar by a speaker from UPMC. And if you do
Ms.
any due
Ravati,
diligence
if-
on her, I will
if
finish
you
up.
could wrap up.
You will see that she is part of seminars that focus on things, they separate the groups into white and non-white, talk about microaggressions, they talk about white privilege, white fragility, all of those things. If that's what we're buying into, fine. If that's what the majority of this board decides, fine. But you haven't decided it yet, and yet your PTO is going forward with this event. I'm done coming to these meetings because your administration does what it wants to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And they're not online, correct, Ms.
We're
Williams?
done.
Can I
That's
just
it.
speak, because I went to sign up, but this sheet was already taken.
I-
Okay, it'll be quick, I promise. My name is Judy Masucci. I've been a 20-year Pine Township resident. I just wanted to give a real-life example of something that happened to my son when he was in grade school, that gives an example of elimination of barriers and equity. So when my son was in, I believe it was 3rd grade, he has always been a really smart kid. I think in 1st or 2nd grade, he actually wrote a computer program to help his classmates with their math facts. My husband was a math major in college, so my son was born knowing how to do math. But when he was in 3rd grade, he struggled with math facts. They were timed quizzes, and he struggled and struggled and struggled and could not pass these quizzes. And yet, he was really, really smart at math. And so we sat down with his teacher, and we asked her, at the time, my son had OT issues, so it was really hard for him to write. So we sat down with the teacher, and we asked her to just give him an oral quiz. And as soon as he started getting oral quizzes, he flew through his math facts. He went, struggled for 3 weeks, and then just flew through all of the math facts and excelled. And he didn't always need the written or the oral quizzes. So what the teacher would do is if he didn't pass taking it the normal way, then she would give him an oral quiz. And so it was an accommodation that allowed him to show his ability for math, right? It was his writing that was holding him back from passing math. So that's an example of an elimination of a barrier and equity. It's just a real life example that I just wanted to throw out so that you could understand how it applies in an educational system. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes, you may. We're good on time right now.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Buse. I live off Sandy Hill Road in Richland. And I just wanted to discuss the workshop that is available this Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. That is, nobody is required to go, but everyone is invited to attend, and you can choose to attend if you would like. I think it will be super beneficial to our entire community. Cassandra Cooper is a DEI expert at UPMC, and I hope to see everyone there. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1.03, student and staff recognition. Ms. Hathorn.
9 can you hear me? 9 Pine-Richland High School seniors who were named semifinalists in the 2022 National Merit Scholarship Corporation are being named finalists. They include Kevin Friends, Ethan Jancy, Nicholas Labuda, Eliana Lazaro, Tig Manna, Andrew Nee, Jeffrey Auk, Annabelle Pesa, and Amish Sethi. You heard about them earlier this year as they were being recognized to be semifinalists. Also, the PA Music Educators Association announced that 3 Pine-Richland High School students are being selected for PMEA All-State programs. They include Grace Haslett for orchestra, Gabby Boudreau for band, and Nora Russell for choir. So that's quite a big honor to have 3 this year. Nora was chosen for a 3rd consecutive time, also very rare. And that program will take place April 6th through the 9th. Pine-Richland High School sophomores earned honorable mentions in the Pittsburgh Public Theater Shakespeare Monologue and Scene Contest in February. They include Chloe Castellan, Lauren King, Sydney Rovnan, Brianna Thell, and Madeline Walzer, so congratulations. Also, Pine-Richland High School students earned several nominations in the 2nd annual Prime Stage High School Drama Awards program for the play The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. Also, congratulations. We did mention the musical took place in March, Shrek the musical, but worth mentioning again, the production involved lively musical numbers and revolving sceneries. If you didn't get a chance to see it, we have some photos online. Also, the Brewer Foundation and New York University announced Pine-Richland High School as one of the elite 8 teams for the annual International Public Policy Forum. We've been also following this from the beginning of the year when there was a pool of 64 teams. Seniors Miles Brown, Matthew Farmer, Taj Manna, Andrew Nee, Mish Sethi, and Callie Stoltz, which we heard from earlier, make up the 21-22 Pine-Richland High School team. Also, Pine-Richland High School seniors participated in the 17th annual Bots IQ regional competition at Robert Morris on March 2nd. It's a gladiator mashup of bots created by students. Pine-Richland earned 2nd place in this competition. Also, the Mars Pine-Richland High School AFTROTC program earned 1st place overall at Parkersburg South Drill Meet, and that was sponsored by the South Park Regional Air Force Association, so congratulations. Also, let's see, we had the team also go to the varsity drill competition at Tecumseh High School, and that earned them a first-time trip to nationals, so congratulations for that. That's the first time in history. Also, A.W. Beatty's 4-person carpentry and building construction team earned 2nd place in the secondary construction management category of the National Association of Home Builders student competition in Florida. So high school senior Graydon Sharon earned the accolades along with team members from Northgate and North Allegheny. A.W. Beatty announced the Students of the Month honorees include sophomore Adam Zolewski for automotive collision, Maria Hoff for cosmetology, junior Ryan Persheli for emergency response technician, and junior Hunter Wierzobowski for robotics engineering technology. Also, lots of teams competing in WIPIAL's regional or state competition. The high school basketball team competed in WIPIAL quarterfinals and was stopped by Fox Chapel. We had 3 youth girls basketball teams and 2 youth boys basketball teams qualify for state competitions, and the 4th grade girls team earned the state championship title, so good for them. Also, the hockey team advanced to the Penguin Cup semifinalists and was shut out by Peters Township. The varsity inline hockey team earned 1st place in the PA Interscholastic Roller Hockey Championships. The gymnastics teams earned 6th place at WIPIAL's, and several athletes qualified for PIAAs. And the Pine-Richland High School wrestling team made history in having 9 wrestlers qualify for WIPIAL's. 2 of those wrestlers qualified for PIA Wrestling Championships March 10th and 11th in Hershey. They included Kellen Laffey and senior Kellen Laffey and junior Anthony Ferraro. So congratulations. Kellen took a 6th place finish. Anthony did have a setback, but had an impressive 38 victories. Kellen represented WIPIAL's in the 48th Annual Wrestling Classic on March 25th. 8th grader McLean Miller placed 3rd at the PA Junior Wrestling State Championships. Mr. Robert Hunt was voted as Wrestling Section Assistant Coach of the Year. Also, the swimming and diving team participated in WIPIAL and PIA Diving and Swimming Championships. And also, our bocce team placed 1st, as you know, at the Northeast Division Finals, but moved on to states in Clarion on March 24th, and they placed 5th. rare to place in the first year, so a big congratulations. All of those details plus more recognition items can be found at pinerichland.org. You'll find all you need for the individual competitions.
Tonight, we didn't have, if you recall, the recognition at our last meeting, so this was like a recognition and a half.
Oh, yes, yes.
What's amazing when we do take the time to listen and see what's out there, whether it's on the website or in social media that Ms. Hathorn helps coordinate, or at board meetings, to see the breadth of opportunity available to kids and the manner in which they engage and connect. I mean, it is exactly back to that mission of every student every day, and because our kids are so different, they get plugged in to different things, and to see not only the fact that they're engaged in areas of passion for them, they're exposed to things they never anticipated seeing before, and all of that, including A.W. Beatty and everything else, we just heard truly the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, and there's plenty more
Yeah.
for the next. I have a whole list I'm
We-
still going through. Yeah.
We would expect that. Item 3.01 later has one of the saddest and most joyful pieces of information that I can even contemplate. And for 90 days, we'll be talking about it. And that is Ms. Hathorn's retirement
Yeah.
from
Yes.
education in Pennsylvania as she's relocating. And tonight is not necessarily the time. This is one of many places where we will be talking, I'll be talking about her. But she is a true blessing to this community. She is of this community. She is
Second
as
generation.
selfless
Right.
a leader and communicator as anyone could ever hope to have. And we are so fortunate to have worked with you.
Thank you, and I just want to say this is hard for me, but I'm going to follow my heart this time. I usually do things very rationally, and I am still a heart person, so yes, I'm relocating. I never thought I'd have a second chance of finding a person for me, so that's where I'm moving on. But I want to tell you, this team, I can't even begin to tell you, starting with Dr. Miller and our assistant superintendents, from previous board members to current board members, and Barb Williams and this senior leadership team. The person that gets to step in here is really stepping into a good team, and they really care about communication and the engagement of our parents, students, and staff. And it's tough for me to do because we built so much here with the communication, and I know it'll continue on. I'll help through the end of June, but I'm really proud to be a part of this team, especially earning the Mid-Atlantic award. I mean, that is like the pinnacle. And you know, we have educated board members, and they know their stuff from higher ed to environmental to finances. We have it here, and I really hope that everybody can come together and really pour their heart in it, because we really do focus on the same mission of our students learning, you know, focusing on learning for every student every day. And I hope we can keep that in mind. And I'm looking forward to helping someone come in and integrate with the district. So I will send a message out to the community after. So thank you for everything.
Thank you, Ms. Hathorn, and on behalf of us all, thank you. Obviously, we need you to take a drink after that recognition and everything else. But also, just so you know, I'm gonna be proposing this, that we keep your voice on the rapid call so that kids know what to do. So.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad. Yeah.
So I don't know what we're going to do without it. But anyway, thank you very
You'll
much.
get a new voice, and that person, you'll learn to love them. So.
Well, thank you.
Oh, and I just want to mention, I am keeping my engagement into the Ram family. I'm marrying someone from high school who was in my AP English 2 class.
Wait a second. Did we just write a Lifetime movie? Did
I have the picture.
That
If
is good.
anybody is blinded by anything, hold your hand up. And say,
Okay. I think I've lost my space here. 1.04, correspondence, Ms. Williams.
The following people emailed the board regarding contact tracing: Rebecca Hoffman, Julie Wosick, Michael Barber, Laura Potowski, and Brianna Bayer. The following people emailed the board: Heather Kerchick, regarding the school board meeting on DEI, Kasha Kosovic regarding children in the cafeteria, Laura and Greg Rich regarding reimbursement of the French trip, Deb Kronierek regarding contact tracing, masking, and quarantine measures, Donna Stevenson regarding middle school field hockey volunteer coach, Jennifer Buse regarding an open letter and unconscious bias workshop, Kathleen Ravati regarding cafeteria seating and an evening program at the high school.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Item 1.05, minutes for approval. A motion to approve the meeting minutes as attached.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2.01, transforming the future and PRVA plus. Dr. Miller.
So we've talked about this, but tonight we bring forward for discussion our recommendation. And what we've included here is the result of much reflection, thinking, collaborating, weighing, balancing so many factors related to the educational program. The image, if you could scroll to wherever you see the forest and trees, Mr. Stobener, when this image was first developed, we had responded to the initial closing of schools and needing to navigate learning in a way we had not anticipated. Then, as we moved into 2021, we thoughtfully tailored the approach that was used in order to meet various needs. And so in that 2021 school year, we had over 800 students learning full-time in a virtual model. During 2021, we had to, and again, we've all been here, so I'm not going to rehash the things that we've lived together over the last 24 months. But it's hard to see, and so as we were nearing the end of 2021, we thought it important to sort of set a short-term game plan without trying to see further into the distance. We had anticipated and hoped we would be out of the shadow of the pandemic a long time ago, and therefore would be able to really reflect, evaluate, and consider what the needs are. That has not been our experience. So we're at a place now, we hope, that is coming out of the end of the pandemic, moving to endemic phase of what everybody is dealing with. And we have evolved again in 21-22 with the manner in which we've delivered a full virtual program. We went from over 800 to starting this year at 29. We added some additional students at the end of the third 9 weeks, most of whom have returned back to the in-person environment. And so we're at that place where there are significant implications to think about educational delivery models for 22-23. I'm not going to go through all the rationale in a presentation. It's there for people to read and see, but ultimately what we're recommending is that we pause a full virtual learning option that we would deliver. We pause that and do not pursue that for 22-23. In order to have the time and space that we believe is appropriate to reflect, to think, to discern, and to consider what a transformation might look like. So again, throughout this experience, it's been this or this. We believe that the future will be a place of some degree and type of full virtual option, but exactly what that will look like, we don't think we're in the best position to truly understand now. We also know very clearly that we have a community that values in-person learning. And so our lessons learned in technology integration skills, in platforms and resources, and even the manner in which we've operated board meetings. I mean, it's incredible to see how even the governance function has been augmented throughout the pandemic, and many of these lessons will continue. Lessons in the classroom will continue as well. But we believe, given what we know to be a very low interest, that this is not the time to try to fight our way through that, but rather a time to pause, reflect, continue certain practices, and then strategically consider what will the future look like, and to do that together, to do that with input, to do that in conjunction with our strategic next long-term cycle that will be starting up next year. So again, that's our recommendation. There's a whole lot more detail in there in terms of the why, but we invite that for discussion. I don't know that I don't have the feeling that this needs to be a action item, but rather a dialogue and then direction. If the board would want this to be an action item, then obviously it could be. But I think having clarity and consensus on that, we would move forward with our in-person learning model, which is historically there. It will be better for all the skills and competencies and tools that we now have. But then let's think about what the future looks like and what the needs are.
Any discussion on this item?
I was just going to say, I think there's some potential there in the future, but I think it's a really good idea to step back and think about it. It's never good to be building the plane while you're operating it. We were forced to do that in the past couple of years, but it's good to step back, see where we have strengths and areas for growth, and then make the best product we can. So I think that's a wise decision.
Yep, I agree. We see this happening at the university level, where we've gone back mostly to in-person. It's much better to do it that way, but there are some things here and there, that augmentation that you mentioned, higher education's still sorting through that too. So we're kind of working our way through that together. So I think it's good to take this time and assess, reflect, and then come back at some point.
Yeah, I agree. And well, I am going to steal that saying. I have not heard that before. Build a plane while you're flying it. Build it. I've not. I am going to plagiarize that. But I do agree. I think everyone kind of wanted this to be something that would work now, but now's not always the time. That doesn't mean the door's closed. It just means, hey, we're gonna look at this more thoughtfully. So I do appreciate that. I can't say that I wasn't disappointed when I read the recommendation, but I also understand it and know what went behind it to make that decision. So thank you. Okay, being a planning meeting, I'm going to move to section 3, action items. We do have some things that we need to vote on. Item 3.01 is somewhat with a heavy heart from one of the things that are included in this, but a motion to approve the PRESPA personnel items as attached.
Second.
Item has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3.02 is a motion to approve the purchase of replacement carpeting for portions of Wexford Elementary, Richland Elementary, Eden Hall Upper Elementary, and the high school in the amount of $296,387.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3.03 is a motion to approve the AIU Transition Memorandum of Understanding for the 2021, 2022, and 2022, 2023 school years as attached.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Yes.
Item 3.04 is the first reading of policies 800, operations. Motion to approve the first reading of the batch policies 800 as attached.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I would like to maybe pull out 803 to discuss, not with the actual changing of the school calendar, but perhaps what's listed. I've heard from families of diverse religions, that sometimes it might be good to note when there's like holy days for other religions. So test startings are scheduled, or like right now is Ramadan, so kids might be fasting. So making people aware that was something I'd like to include.
Do you want to share, once you get that turned on, just so there's clarity around what practices happen right now and how that's communicated to the staff and so forth?
So what we do for our staff is we create a whole guide for religious holidays. We provide that to them, before the start of school. I'm actually updating it for next year, and that gets sent out to first our building principals and secretaries. And as we do the calendar planning, they take a look at those big holidays for each religion. And, we're always open to additional ones, but we hit a lot. We've been doing that for some time, and we do provide it to staff. We also do provide it to the staff calendar, so when they're logged in, they can see which holidays. Obviously, if we put it on the regular calendar, you can't even see anything because of the dates, but we do that, and each year it gets even stronger. And it's not to say that we run into overlapping things, but we do our best not to.
Thank you. That's a good update. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Myler, are you still looking to have it pulled? Okay. All right. All right. Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3.05 is a motion to approve the second reading of policies 900 community as attached.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Just want to thank everyone for the last time we had a couple policies pulled out, had the discussion, put them back in so that they're a batch again. If no further discussion, all those in favor? Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Finance, Mr. Kashani.
Yes, sir. So most of these, all of these are informational items. 4.01, we will have some financial reports and accounts payables to approve on the 18th of April. 4.02, also will be asked to approve some budget transfers. 4.03 will be a motion to approve an engagement letter from Echo Financial. 4.04 is a motion to approve some check signers. 4.05, this is a discussion item and more for awareness that, so on the 18th, we'll be asked to vote on how to modify the 2015 A series note. So on the March 21st meeting, we voted on two things: to terminate the swap associated with that note, and also to modify it. And we either need to modify it with a bank loan or a bond refunding. So because it's April 4th and that's April 18th, and 14 days is way too long to make a decision given the current volatility.
Yes.
So Tony's going to give you some data on the 13th.
He is. He's going to provide me with a report on the 13th,
Okay.
and then based on that, I am going to essentially conjure up a recommendation.
Okay.
So we will see what that looks like, and again, with the volatility of the market, you would notice that one thing that's missing from this agenda, and something that we had talked about back in March, was the 2017 refunding. So currently, as of right now, the market is not performing to a point where we would even hit our savings target. We're going to continue to monitor that, and then whenever we have our joint governance finance meeting at the beginning of May, that's going to be part of Tony's presentation as well, is to circle back on the 2017. But in this case, with the underlying debt for the 2015 A, we do need to actually have to make a decision by the end of this month. So we will have a recommendation. Like I said, I'll review the report. You'll have the information prior to the meeting, but I can't say what my recommendation will be yet because I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
Is there a small game of chance on that? Can we vote on that? All right. No? Okay. All right, guys. Thank you, Dana.
You're welcome.
And then 4.06. So on May 2nd, there is a finance governance meeting. We'll be talking about the 2022-23 budget, capital funding plan, and we also did agree to revisit the 2017 and 2014 B series, I think, to pick up this conversation.
We did, and
Yeah.
so I did also request that our swap advisors update those termination values, so we will have that to review at that meeting as well.
Okay. Thank you, Dana.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Kashani.
My pleasure.
Buildings and Grounds, Dr. Mihalik.
Thank you. 5.01 is an information item. It's for consideration at our regular meeting later this month. It'll be a motion to accept bids and award contracts for the purchase and installation of heating and cooling unit replacements at Wexford, Richland, and Hance elementary schools. These are potentially big-ticket items, and I'll...
Yeah, we do have an update, and it's not a good news update. So
No.
bid opening was today. And Mr. Zimmerman, would you like to take that?
Sure.
So, and before
yeah.
he starts, we don't live in there's not a perfect right-wrong discernment of decisions coming forward with respect to a whole lot of things related to capital funding, building projects, bids, et cetera. So we've got some tough decisions that we have to work our way through. So I've asked Mr. Zimmerman to give us his best thinking. Share, this is a time for truly sharing, if and when and do, and what are the rippling impacts on other things. So go ahead, Jeff.
Sure. So as Dr. Miller stated, today was bid opening for the ARP-ESSER project. As you all know from our previous discussions, the ARP-ESSER grant that came in for us was around $1 million. And after the education loss portion of it, we were going to have about $800,000 to spend on HVAC. We put together a project at Wexford, Hance, and Richland that we thought would utilize those funds and try to maximize our usage of those. We were anticipating a project to come in at right around $1 million or a little less. And based off of historical data, we should have been right around that ballpark. Today, the bids came in. One was $2.2 million. And another was $2 million, and that's just for the mechanical portion. We also had an electrical portion, which averaged in the $150,000 range. So at this point, we've got quotes that are double what we had budgeted for the project. We had some serious discussions with our architect and engineering team about why that could be. And honestly, market conditions are driving this completely. Availability of the HVAC units themselves are difficult to get, long lead times, and the actual mechanical portions that the contractors were ordering were double what they expected, even at the contractor level. We spec'd these units out, 37 units for the 3 schools, at about 170 tons of cooling. That's how they kind of measure the size of the units. And normally it's about $3,000 a ton. So now we're double that right now. So we thought that we would have $500,000 just in mechanical pieces for this, and it turned out to be $1 million just for the units themselves. So this gives us kind of an idea of what we're looking for next summer for the HVAC project at the middle school. It gives us a glimpse of what we could look at for the green gym and main gym project for also summer of 23. These material lead times and deliveries and costs are going up. They're getting cost increases sometimes every 2 weeks in some of these industries. So we just have to be aware that this is something that we're going to probably struggle with for the next year to 18 months probably.
So I'm going to interject really quick, just to
Sure.
kind of add in some of the financial information that Mr. Zimmerman and I discussed today at the bid opening. I realize that his numbers were probably slightly shocking when he told you those. But on the flip side, I do have some good news. When I last presented the budget at the beginning of March, our budget deficit was about $1.8 million. Pieces of that in there also had included whether it be teaching positions or somehow tied to transforming the future and into our virtual program. So by eliminating some of those costs in there, plus taking into account any of our personnel changes, we've had reductions in the capital funding plan. Actually, I had everything all updated the other day up until today's bid opening. So the good news is as of last Friday, our budgetary deficit went from 1.8 million down to 700,000. So if I were pushed to a recommendation right now, and Jeff's going to talk about kind of the timing that goes along with this project and how it can affect the future projects with, whether it be the HVAC at the middle school, Richland, our roof replacements, it would be my recommendation that we do move forward. Again, I do realize that that is going to include a draw of fund balance. However, we do have assigned capital improvements in our fund balance of about 14 million. And that does not affect our other assignments, and it does not affect our unassigned amount. We are also strengthening our financial position with bond rating agencies by already terminating the 2015 swap. So again, I realize that it is a large number, but so as not to create the domino effect in our capital funding plan, to stay within the timing of the ESSER funds and making sure that we have those spent in the proper time, we talked about today, what would it look like if we rebid this project? Would we rebid it and rebid it into pieces? And if we rebid it that way, does that make sense? Would the costs even come down? Would we essentially be removing one building? But essentially, does that even make sense to what it is that we're trying to do? So we know that those units at those buildings need to be replaced. So by moving that out a year, it really will have an effect on many of the other projects. Now, I can't say that I have great news, because we did talk about, currently I have $4 million set aside for the middle school project. If that means that those bids could come in at $8 million, okay, I don't have a great solution for that right now. But I can at least say that with the reductions that we've had in terms of operating costs between the beginning of March and now the beginning of April, I feel that we could move forward with this project, use those federal dollars, again, as we indicated to the federal government in our application how we were going to do it. And we're almost kind of back to the net amount that we would have spent had we not had the federal dollars and then without the increased cost. So Mr. Zimmerman, I know you wanted to talk about kind of scheduling in future projects.
Yes, so with the ARP ESSER project, we had that scheduled for this summer. And then the middle school HVAC project, we were going forward with that design and bid so that we could be ready for the summer of '23. So I know that the costs are higher than what we anticipated, but I think it's our best course is to continue with our design process and our bid process so we get these bid packages ready to go. And if we decide not to execute on a project because of the costs or the bid numbers that come out, we can always do that. But it's best not to just not plan and not get those packages ready for possible projects.
Yeah. So just to add to that, John Pappas was here as well today from Eccles. So we had Tower and Eccles present. They're talking about the lead times. Jeff, if you want to share a little bit about that. So even projects that you want to do, something that might typically get turned around in 12 weeks, John
Right.
Pappas described it's 32 weeks. It could, and so even a bid package for the summer of '23 would involve trying to do that in the early fall of '22, in order to be able to have an outside shot of having materials fabricated and in place to be able to do the work in '23. Again, it is a little bit daunting. There is no crystal ball for when it will improve, and there is an implication of kicking multiple cans, big ones, down the road further and potentially even having greater costs. So it's really a tough spot. Again, with the 800,000+ in ESSER, this makes this decision a bit more palatable, but there are not great things ahead. We do have the Richland bathroom, which again, necessary and important. That'll be another example of an indicator, though, that at least tells us what the bidders are doing. It's different types of work, and so there was some hope that those would be more positive numbers because the scope of the type of work is different than the HVAC work.
This does also reiterate that it was absolutely the right decision to move the green gym from this summer, knowing that if we would have bid it, we would be not only up against these increased costs, but up against that supply chain issue, which is what we discussed. And so we made the right decision. I don't know what that means when we put out a design and a bid in the fall. We don't know what we're going to get for that, and I'm not sure how those costs are going to come in for that project as well as for the middle school HVAC.
And again, just with all the stuff that goes on. So Green Gym, we have done the fiscally sort of Mrs. Kirk and my approach to this, which is the save before we spend approach. So we've been saving and saving and saving over multiple years, but the middle school HVAC project doesn't work that way.
Right.
And so again, and we know the middle school HVAC is only the tip of the next couple HVAC projects. So we've got big things coming.
Right, absolutely. It kind of ties us into that entire financial discussion that we've had, where we've been talking about not only our current capital funding plan, next year's capital funding plan, but all of those budgetary decisions that as soon as we pass this budget for 22-23, we're going to be talking about what that looks like for 23-24, what a potential tax increase would look like, what draw of fund balance, because again, you cannot just continuously draw from fund balance. What we're doing right now is intentional, but with some of those large projects, we really need to look at that. Or are we starting to reach the point where we would need a slight amount of debt as well? I don't know. I'm not sure. But those are really the decision points that we're going to have to make for 23-24.
So Dana, I would also say that the process we're using to evaluate the roofs is going to benefit us in this capacity, because with the $50,000 that we put aside for roof repairs this year, and we're pushing the roofs off from 1 to 3 more years, I think that's going to work out in our best interest, because right now roofing is just in the same category as the HVAC projects as far as being difficult to execute those projects right now. The vendors are having a hard time securing materials, getting projects lined up. So the roofing industry is really behind. As Dr. Miller mentioned, the restrooms over at Richland Elementary, we think that those will be executable and not have a huge increase based on the trades that are going to be there. We're going to see that as we get that bid ready to go shortly, and you'll see that that's on the agenda tonight as well for information. But as you just seen in the carpeting that we just approved in just the earlier motion, carpeting has gone up 15% over the last year and a half, where we've seen the HVAC double. So not every industry is being affected in the same capacity.
Any discussion? Mr. Zimmerman, and I know that you looked at this as you were putting the projects together. In light of what's going on, and this one seems to make sense with where we are with having the monies available, but for the future ones, is there an assessment of what, if it had to be pushed back, could be pushed back? Because I don't see this as sustainable in the HVAC market. I mean, some of this inflation is going to have to come back down to earth. The question is when. So is there any opportunities looking at other projects to maybe say, okay, and now because of what we've seen the cost do, now it makes sense to patch, repair. Obviously, we need safety, we need heat, we need cooling. That's paramount. But is there a possibility to look at that to say, hey, we can now shift this because of what we're looking at cost-wise?
Yeah, honestly, we're going to look at different avenues. We'll continue to plan out the HVAC projects so that we have them ready to go whenever the market conditions say we can execute them at a good cost. But we're also going to look at what it would take to get a reasonable amount of repair parts for the middle school and Wexford Elementary, and maybe have our own stock here on hand. We've been doing kind of a just-in-time approach, but that was one of the main keys that we decided to do the big projects all at once. Is some of those repair items were getting more difficult to find, especially short notice. So I think that's going to be one of our approaches, is to look and see what we could possibly get for on stock in hand, and try to get our cycle times reduced for repairs when they do happen at the middle school in Wexford, if we have to push these out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just going to say that's a risk too. If we push them out, you may not get parts to fix it. So
Right.
we're in a position where we have to do what we can.
Yep.
Get in the queue and get it fixed, and deal with the inflation, but knowing that we'll come out of that.
All right, back to you,
Okay.
Matt.
Yeah, so item 5.02 is replacement of the high school combi ovens. So this will be on our agenda later on this month. Motion to approve the replacement of 2 combi ovens at Pine-Richland High School cafeteria by Curran Taylor through the Co-Stars program. Item 5.03, also an information item. This is also considered at the next meeting, a motion to approve the purchase of furniture for library renovation projects at Eden Hall Upper Elementary, Richland Elementary, Wexford Elementary, and at the high school. There's some cool drawings in there for people who want to look at it. Item 5.04 is information item, also for consideration at our next meeting, a motion to approve the purchase of LED parking lot lighting retrofit kits and exterior replacement lighting for Eden Hall Upper Elementary from Shadler Yesco Distribution, which is a Co-Stars vendor. And it's great that we're doing LED. Item 5.05, information item, also at our next meeting, motion to authorize advertisement for bids for restroom renovations at Richland Elementary, which was just discussed. And then 5.06, freestanding hand sanitizing stations. This is a motion to accept at our next meeting in accordance with Board Policy 702. With sincere gratitude, a donation of 100 automatic freestanding hand sanitizing stations from Active Wind for an approximate value of $60,000. And item 5.07, information item also for consideration at our next meeting, a motion to accept in accordance with Policy 702 and also with sincere gratitude, a donation from the PR Touchdown Club, an industrial coffee maker for the stadium concession stand at a cost of approximately $1,900. The unit can brew up to 18.9 gallons of coffee per hour. That's pretty impressive. It's a lot of coffee.
We could have used that at some of the meetings earlier.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Can I make a suggestion that as long as the bids that haven't posted yet on 502 through 505, that we move those to consent agenda, and I guess I would use the caveat of about a 10% as related to expected. If anyone has an issue with that, obviously we can leave them all pulled out. I would like 501 to continue to be pulled out because it's such a large expenditure, and of course 506 and 507 because of the gratitude for a donation.
Yes. And for 505, that's actually just the authorization to bid.
Oh.
So those bids will be opened in May, and then you'll be able to see what those are, and then we'll award them in May. So this is really just to authorize the actual bid.
Yep.
The drawings and the specifications should be about 95, 97% done by then. So we're going to attach everything that we have. There might be a couple of tweaks that we just need to do to some of the language, but all of the design in and of itself is done for those restrooms. We are going through the county approval process this week, trying to make sure that we have the proper number of fixtures and that they're okay with everything on the front end.
I think that's a good idea. Thanks.
So, Ms. Williams, I don't know if you captured. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mihalik. Academic achievement, Dr. Meyer.
This is a public information item. Policy 217, graduate requirements, were last revisited in December 2018. Administration high school staff received this policy, or reviewed this policy, and do not believe any changes are needed at this time. Dr. Pasquinelli, do you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, thank you. And Dr. Bowman's here as well in case we have any questions for her. But this is just for information. The policy is fine as is, but we did make some modifications to the administrative regulations, the AR, that we wanted to bring to everybody's attention. So graduation credits are the same, and the options that students have for getting at those 24 credits remains the same. The major changes within the AR are around Act 158 that was passed last year. That provides different pathway options for students to meet proficiencies on Keystone exams. If you recall back when Keystones first started, there was a requirement for school districts to require supplemental instruction when students scored at the non-proficient level. What happened as a result of that is some students couldn't get to some of the courses that they wanted to take because of the requirement for supplemental instruction. It really impacted students in career CTE programs. So these modifications then provide a lot of different options based upon interest and pathways for students. There's still rigor and expectation for performance. Our recommendation is still for students at Pine-Richland to take the assessment at the end of their trigger course. For us, that's most kids are in 8th grade in algebra, 9th grade in biology, and 9th grade in lit. If they score below proficiency, then we do have support that's available to them. It is not required, but it's available to support them as they prepare for the next opportunity to take the assessment, which would be the spring of the following year, the winter of the following year, and then one last time at the spring of the following year. We feel like we can support the students to reach the traditional proficiency pathways that way, but Act 158 provides a lot of different options if that doesn't work. Again, we're fortunate the majority of our students meet proficiency, so it'll be for a small percentage of students. It still allows them to explore the program of studies based upon their interest, which we think is a huge benefit. So that's Act 158, different pathways for students. The second part of the recommendation is around placing Keystone results on students' transcripts. Again, in the past, that was a requirement. It is now a local decision. Our recommendation is to make that optional for families. So the default would be not to have the score on the transcript, but if a family wants their Keystone scores on the transcript, we can make that happen. We currently do that with class rank as well. That defaults to not being placed on the transcript, but it can be placed on if a student and family should so choose. Mrs. Whalen, most of you know, works a lot with colleges and universities, and the priority in terms of looking at things like Keystone scores on transcripts and class ranks, it's just not there, just because there's so many differences from one school district to the next in terms of things like class rank. So we feel that's a good option for our families to make that determination. So those are the main modifications. We have that in the AR. If you're comfortable with that, then our next step would be to take all the information, make sure it's clearly placed on our website, and make sure our students and families are clear about all those options that are available to them. Dr. Bowman, anything you want to add to that?
I don't know if this is for Dr. Pasquinelli or Dr. Bowman, but what does that look like? Is that where, when students are coming up to graduation, that the option, a letter will go out and say, hey, do you want this included, or is it basically left on the default and only when the families approach? So it's not like a preemptive, hey, do you want this? It is, they have to come to you.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
default to not being there. If they'd request it, then we would place it on.
Okay.
But they would have to request that.
Thank you.
And we'll communicate that so people know that it's not going to be there, and to know that they'll have to request to get it placed on their transcript.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Student Services, Mrs. Hillman.
Agenda item 7.01 is the AIU Travel Instruction Services Agreement for 2022-23. This is an information item for board consideration at the regular April meeting. A motion to approve the attached Travel Instruction Services Agreement with the Allegheny Intermediate Unit for 2022-2023 school year.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Huswit, just out of curiosity, because I don't have it in front of me, seeing the inflation in some of the other things, are we seeing, I can't recall, I think this is pretty close, if not identical to last year, but I don't know. Are we seeing an increase in some of these service rates yet?
Not significantly.
Not significantly. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Hillman. Staff Services, Mr. Cassidy.
8.01 is an information item for board consideration at the regular meeting. There will be a motion to approve the PREA, PRESPA personnel and athletic, non-athletic supplements. 8.02 is an information item for board consideration at the regular April meeting. There will be a motion to approve the first reading of Batch Policies 100 programs. And then 8.03 is an information item. Staff Service Governance Meeting is scheduled for April 18th, 2022.
Just to touch back on 8.02, is everyone comfortable with, for this one coming up for the first read with no policies being pulled at this point?
For policy 119, that's the current events, but I think there's some major revisions going on. I just thought if we took some time and you could explain, I looked at the 3 documents that you're merging, but I don't know if the rest of the board has an idea of where that policy's going.
Yeah, so that might be an example of one that would be pulled. We'll see what kind of progress can be made and what the language looks like. But do you want to take that?
Yeah, so essentially, we have 119 talking about current events, but what has come out of the in-depth program review process for social studies was a look at how we need to include current events in the classroom, but the discussion really lies around ensuring that our teachers are trained and able to handle those things in terms of facilitating discussion, maintaining a neutral standpoint, and helping promote civil discourse within the classroom. And so teachers are more hesitant, obviously, in terms of bringing up topics that are happening in the daily news, et cetera, for fear of they don't want their viewpoint to be known to the students, and they don't know necessarily how to facilitate discussion with students. So we see there being a need to give them professional development in this manner, but they also would benefit from having language around that live within the policy and the AR so that they are feeling confident that this is what we need to do to promote civil discourse and the ability for our students to be informed, engaged citizens who can think critically and make their own decisions based on input. So we intend to take what was in a standalone guidelines document and fold that back into the language of the AR and the policy so that it's a little stronger and clearer, and the staff understand the support that we have for them as well in that regard.
Yeah. So I'm going to hit politics as well. Okay. So again, we often say it's great when a policy can stand the test of time. And so sometimes concise policies allow that to happen. And so even the existing policy, point number 1 is current events, is related to course educational goals and student level of maturity. What that means is a current event in a social studies topic should align with a social studies course. A current event in social studies should not be the purview of a math teacher's opportunity to try to tie that in, right? So I mean, simple things like that. But the reality is, given sensitivity, we need, and our educators need to have a framework, parameters, and training. One of the topics that the board may recall from social studies was around politics. And a perfect example, having politicians, let's say a state representative, be able to engage with students in an appropriate course is outstanding. We want to be able to support that kind of thing as a learning opportunity presented in a certain way. But the time to have a politician within a classroom or a school setting isn't while there are signs in yards and we're getting ready for an election, right? So there are certain periods of time when we would say maybe there's a conflict there, but once an election has happened, then that's a tool and opportunity for the classroom. And so there's a lot of parts and pieces to this that, again, we feel like we have them all. They just need to be combined and organized in a way, and I'm hoping that that leads to then good discussion amongst the board, and then eventually really good, solid foundation for our teachers.
Greg, I had one more policy. 146.1, which is the new policy, the trauma-informed approach. I don't know, because that's a new policy, if we want to pull that just to discuss it.
I was going to suggest that too, Lisa, because it is new, and it also because it's a topic that's worthy of, I think, some awareness in what that policy's about. So, for sure, I'd like that
Okay.
too.
And then the last one I had was 108, which is the adoption of textbooks. And I've been talking with Dr. Pasquinelli about that. I had a question on some language that was added into it. But I think I'm still working through that with him. I don't know if we need to pull it now, or we can decide at the next, or at the first reading at the next meeting.
So from a consensus standpoint, 146 being a new policy to pull for sure, 119 and 108 to be determined?
Yeah.
Would everyone be comfortable with that? Just looking for kind of head nods. Okay. All right. So at this point, 146 pulled. The others all in.
46.1.
I'm sorry, 146.1. Thank you.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah,
Whatever-
yeah.
whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And again, current events we'll try, but we'll see how far we get.
Yeah.
2 weeks passes quickly, so.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Operational Services, Mrs. Bursalis.
So item number 9.01 is for board consideration at the regular April meeting, and it is a motion to approve a renewal agreement with Sodexo with a guaranteed financial return of $85,000 for the fiscal year 2022-23. Item 9.02 is a reminder that there is an operational services governance meeting on June 20th.
Thank you, Mrs. Bursalis. We'll move to Section 10, Board Business. Item 10.01 is a review of the joint governance meeting, the DEI discussions, and I don't know if we need to go into the full presentation or anything, but I think my opinion, a healthy discussion. Still some items that are laying out there, but I think this is the time, because we ran up against some time here. Is let's discuss some next steps as to where we want to go. I mean, we've got a policy that is has been debated and has been significantly changed. So I think this would certainly qualify if it got to a read point as a first read. But are we at that point? I wanted to find out from everyone where we all believe we need to go with this.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just share where we were thinking based upon our conversation prior to this meeting. Last board meeting, we talked about the additional questions to the stakeholder survey. That was agreed upon, so those will be part of the revised stakeholder surveys. Again, 2 questions around diversity, 2 around equity, and 2 around inclusion. Last year we had 1, this year we'll have 2. We're going to move forward with the internal audit. That's diversity, equity, inclusion audit. Again, all internal stakeholders. We did get some feedback on making some modifications to that committee. We'll take that and make those modifications, but want to move on that over the course of probably end of April, early May at the latest. So stakeholder survey, audit work for internal, and then our recommendation based upon feedback we heard is take 832. We received some additional feedback today on some language. We'll make that modification and then want to bring it at the next board meeting as an informational item and then let that discussion occur.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the joint governance meeting? All right. Item 10.02 is informational or a discussion item around the spring communication from the board. Again, one of our goals as a board was to increase communications directly with the community. Feels like we're around budget time, so it feels like the time to do it. Wanted to get board's input on this. What I would suggest is that from a board leadership standpoint, Mark, Amy, and I kind of pull our heads together and start talking about a communication. I think when we look at some of the challenges that we're facing, it's new challenges now coming out of the pandemic. With the inflationary measures that are happening, we've obviously seen some pressures on it today. Discussing the budget that we're currently up against, and then also looking out, possibly pull Dana into that conversation, kind of get a first pass. I think finance is where I was kind of focused at this point, but I wanted to get board's feel for what they think a appropriate topic for spring communication would be. Budget time just feels right for that for me, so.
I agree. I agree with that. I think we should include how much how much progress has been made on all of the bonds, the fiscal discipline, the removing of some of the swaps and things that have impacted our ratings from the rating agencies. I think that is, highlighting the discipline and the strategy, and then how that puts us in as good a position as we could be in as we face the inflationary pressures and need to update equipment.
It's going to be a lot harder to take stuff out than you're going to
Yeah.
have plenty to want to say. But
Yeah, and that I'm kind of thinking, as I think it through, I think of where we were, where we are, and where we're going with a kind of communication.
So if there were an idea that I wanted to convey, and I was going to evaluate the evidence or bullet points or more detail that I give, it would be to convey the long-term planning that we engage in collaboratively. So, we're looking at stuff with an eye toward fiscal sustainability. We looked at this last year. We said this. We're saying this about next year. We plan, yes, we're reactive to a certain extent, but we have sort of long-term overarching visions about where we want to go. And, we adjust accordingly, but I think the amount of thought that we put into it is what you would want to convey, and edit things out from there. But good luck with that.
Well, so again, just my first thought was board leadership. We can have up to one more discuss this kind of in a off meeting kind of setting. Is anyone else interested in joining this discussion, or? Peter, good luck with that.
I got a red pen that's waiting for the other end of that conversation, if you'd like. Yeah.
Mark and Amy, I kind of volunteered you without asking you, so are you guys comfortable with that? I think us getting together and again pulling Dana in, since it'll be financially focused, and then maybe wrangling Rachel in for some of her communication expertise before she splits. Yeah. So, but we've got 90 days for that, so we'll get that in before that. So if everyone's comfortable with that, that'll be the plan. I would ask if anyone comes up with any other topics. I think Dr. Mihalik and Peter kind of hit on some topics that would make sense to tie into everything. It will be. We don't want to make this 16 pages. We want it readable. So it's going to be, what do we leave out, right? So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And item 10.03 is notice of a board senior leadership team workshop. And the administration would like to schedule the board SLT workshop on July 11th, 2022, beginning at 5 p.m. And will reflect on organizational performance and clarify specific priorities for the 2022-2023 school year. So if everyone could look at their calendars and provide feedback if that date works. So
The date.
Correct. So we would be starting an hour earlier and come up against a hard stop on that. And that is... I'm not looking at it right now. Is that a combined? It's a combined meeting, so it'll be a lot of information in one night. But those of you who have not participated in the senior leadership board kind of workshops, they've been productive and usually paired with the senior leader that your area most closely aligns with, I think that'd be the way we'd want to do it again this year. So if anyone has any objections to that date or can't make it, please let us know so we can kind of search around, see if anything else works. Moving into the meeting closing, section 11, item 11.01, reports, and we have reports from at least 2 board members. And Mrs. Turchik, just because your bullet points first, I'll defer to you for a Pine Township Parks and Rec update.
Okay, mine's just pretty brief. So we've probably, a lot of you have seen the our art students did some work on the snowplows, and so we've seen those around town, and they look really great, and we all hope we don't see them again this year. But there's some other art projects going on that they've partnered with students. There's a tunnel that was recently built. I think it goes under Pierce Mill, and they're working in there. And then they've also in the community center, they've reached out to the art department to get some artwork to hang up in the community center, maybe on the walking track. So they have, Joni at the community center has been in touch with a lot of different art teachers. So that's kind of an exciting thing for our kids to be featured there, and it's a good thing for the community. And the other thing, the baseball fields at Pine Park, which our middle schoolers and I think our ninth grade baseball team use, they are either replacing the mounds or they're putting movable mounds. So it's still in the process, but they have asked if we will contribute to part of that. They've also asked PRBSA, and they've asked Bradmore Pine. And like I said, it's in the beginning stage, so I don't know what that is, but we'll throw that out there.
Thank you, Mrs. Turchik. And just in case anybody is complaining in a week or so when we all have to shovel our driveways, we can blame Ms. Turchik for cursing us that we will see those snowplows again. Mrs. Hillman, legislative update.
Yes, I wanted to update on the AIU Legislative Forum, and that took place on Thursday, March 31st at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Central Office. Christina, Peter, Dr. Miller, and I all attended, and they invited all legislators in Allegheny County to attend, and I think they had 6 in person, 6 PA representatives, 1 senator, and it was moderated by John Delano from KDKA, and he asked the legislators 5 questions. The first being their view on civil discourse, and in general, most of them agreed that most of their important work happens behind the scenes in committees. And unfortunately, the public doesn't see that. So they're focusing on the sound bites, things they see in the news. But they do a lot of good work. We're just not getting all of that from the news. So that was the feedback from the legislators on just the general topic of civil discourse. The second question was regarding the governor's budget proposal. He asked, is it realistic? So the proposal included a $1.55 billion increase in basic education funding. Those supporting it said it's a step in the right direction because it continues to make needed investments in public education, including area of special education funding. And the critics question whether that level of funding, which would be the largest increase in the state's history, is feasible or even sustainable. And they all agreed that they'll have a better idea in June what the budget's going to look like. The third question was regarding the school funding trial and should there be reforms and what should they look like. Some background, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the school funding trial, but the closing arguments took place on March 10th. And the petitioners claim that the state maintains a funding system that discriminates against students and districts with low income and low property values, and they're requesting that the General Assembly use a fair funding formula, even arguing that the state uses outdated data in its current formula and it's unconstitutional. Opponents are saying that although the funding formula is not perfect and may need reform, it's not unconstitutional, and the court should not be devising standards and crossing into the legislative arena. So after the 10th, it moved to post-trial legal filings, and that will go until July. Then they'll focus on an oral argument on legal issues, and then there'll be a final ruling, which would be months from now. So maybe in the fall we might know. The fourth question was regarding charter schools and the new regulations, which were passed by the PRRC on the 21st, which I talked about at the last meeting. Most of the legislators supported the new regulations, but they were concerned they didn't address any funding issues, which there are some separate bills in the legislature that do address the funding issues. They also didn't address the need for funding reform associated with the charter schools. The House Education Committee did pass a resolution last week to reject the new rules that were adopted by the IRRC. It now goes to the full House for consideration and then on to the Senate. And we'll see where it goes from there, likely to the governor, who's expected to veto it. The last question was regarding the types of DEI efforts that schools should be promoting in general. Several of the legislators discussed the need for expressing different viewpoints in the teaching of history and other subjects, as well as using textbooks that reflect the experiences and backgrounds of various groups and cultures. There was another legislator that focused on inclusion in the classroom and the importance of including students with disabilities. There wasn't a lot of back and forth on this because they all seemed to be in agreement, the legislators on the panel. After the DEI question, they took a few questions from the audience, and then it finished up. I did want to mention one piece of legislation which was not discussed at the forum, and that's House Bill 972. And that's the Fairness and Women's Sports Act. And this passed out of the House Education Committee on March 29th, and it will be on the House floor on Monday, April 11th, when they reconvene. Under this bill, interscholastic, intercollegiate, or club athletic teams that are sponsored by a school or public school entity, or where students or teams compete against a public school, must be expressly designated based on their sex, which is defined as the biological distinction between male and female based on reproductive biology and genetic makeup. So it also sets legal recourse for those who feel they've lost opportunities or retaliated against should transgender female athletes participate in sports against biological females. So that bill passed out, and it will go to the House floor on April 11th.
Thank you. Are there any additional reports? We will move to item 11.02, recognition of visitors. Ms. Williams, how many do we have?
We have two, just in person.
Just in person?
Yep.
Thank you.
Our first one is Mike Barber.
Mike Barber, Richland Road. I just want to say great big thank you to the administration, especially Dr. Miller, Dr. Justice, Principals Kuzilla, and Principal Gyrens. I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, but she's the virtual academy principal. Love your music video, by the way. But I just want to say thank you for the amount of attention that, not the amount of attention, but the fact that you've made our family feel like that motto extends to us as well, because we were one of those families that had to pull our kids. And so whoever came up with the idea to allow students to come back in the third, after the third period quarter ended, I really appreciate it, because I got to see my son go back on the bus on the morning with the numbers being so low. He's still rocking a mask, but when he got on the bus, as they pulled up, everybody was cheering for him, and it was just really nice to watch him get on the bus. All the kids excited, him excited, my daughter going to school, seeing your son. But we really appreciate the administration that is responsive and working with us directly, and whoever came up with that idea to allow students to go opt back in. We really appreciate it, and I'll treasure that moment in the morning, seeing my son get back on that bus for the rest of my life. So I appreciate that. Whoever's idea that was, I cannot extend a deep enough appreciation for whoever's idea that was. Thank you.
sorry, thank you. Next speaker.
The last speaker is, you don't need to speak. I spoke earlier. Okay, just going to check. Thank you. That's it
Okay,
then.
so that's it. So we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.